Our next speaker is Ms. Robbin Peach, Program Manager of Resiliency for Massport. The title of her talk is Implementing Resilience, Massachusetts Port Authority's Resiliency Program. Robbin Peach is the Program Manager of Resilience for the Massachusetts Port Authority, where she oversees capital and operational improvements for resiliency purposes in the Boston Harbor Seaport, Logan International Airport, and Massport's two other regional airports. Prior to coming to Massport, Ms. Peach founded and directed the Collaborative Institute for Oceans, Climate, and Security, a public-private think tank exploring the effects of changing climate on coastal oceans and national security. She's also worked in roles of urban planner and designer for the city of Boston. Ms. Peach has an MPA from Harvard Kennedy School and lives near the ocean in Mattapoisett, Massachusetts. Ms. Peach.
Thank you. Oh, that's intimidating. I think Dr. Becker left the performance art piece to me because I have a lot of slides and my style is to just zip through them quickly and just give you an overall impression, excuse me, of what we're doing. So let me see if I can master the technology. Okay. For those of you who are not familiar with the Massachusetts Port Authority, we are a quasi-public agency in Massachusetts that's responsible for taking care of, which means designing and maintaining and improving, Logan International Airport. Many of you have probably flown into there. But we also have two other airports, Worcester Regional and Hanscom. And we're also responsible for the Port of Boston. We have also 500 acres that was given to Massport by the Massachusetts legislature when Massport was created. We cannot sell that land by legislative mandate, so we rent it to developers and have 99-year leases. So we are responsible for ensuring that whatever's developed on this land not only meets our codes and city codes, but is as forward-thinking and cutting-edge as possible. I'm just going to whip through these next couple slides for those of you who have not been to Boston Harbor, just to give you an impression. It is the oldest continually active port in the Western Hemisphere. It supports a lot of activity, both from a human resources, job creation point of view, as well as contributing to the regional economy. We have a lot of container lines that come in. This is just, again, I'm just going to whip through these really quickly. But on both the South Boston side and on the East Boston side, we have several ship repair yards. We have private ferry operations. We have marinas, the Coast Guard's Boston sector is right there in South Boston. The Cruise Port Boston is increasing in popularity. It's important to the tourism activity in Boston. It mostly goes to the Caribbean and up to Canada, but every year it gets more and more longer-term cruises under its responsibility. I like to give a context for what we're doing. So this is Logan International Airport. And over here, you can see South Boston, and you can see the cruise terminal. And this is East Boston, our direct neighbor, and I'll be talking about that a little later. City of Boston was built on a fill, and you'll also see in other maps that I'm going to be showing you that the places that were most vulnerable are the places where we were filled. So why do we have a resiliency program at Massport? You've seen photographs of Katrina, Superstorm Sandy. Massport decided that it would get ahead of the curve. The last three storms that have hit Boston, major storms, have hit during low tide. If they'd hit at high tide, we would have been as bad off as New York City. So it became incumbent upon Massport to start thinking a little proactively. You know, when Superstorm Sandy was coming our way, we did everything that we could do as far as getting our term contractors on site, putting hazardous waste out of harm's way, getting our FOD out of the way. But luckily, we weren't damaged very much. The only thing that happened were a couple solar panels were blown off some roofs and some sheeting off some old, some old storage sheds came off and it was ready to be replaced anyway. So we considered ourselves very lucky. Had it hit us more directly, we would have been out of operation for quite some time. The Logan International Airport is the place of first responders. It's a place where the military lands. The seaport is the place where the Coast Guard comes in. It's not so much the money that would be lost, though it would be significant if the airport were closed for a long period of time, but it was more incumbent upon us to make sure we were resilient so that we could have the military land when needed for search and rescue, etc. We look at resiliency in two ways at Massport. You've heard a lot about the greening of boats and harbors, and we do that. We received $1 million FAA grant, excuse me, to create a sustainability plan for Massport. But what I'm going to be talking about is really how we're going to address the impacts. I'm the first program manager of Resiliency. I've been there 2 years. And we define resiliency as ability of a system to withstand a major event within an acceptable period of time. And we had to balance the cost of creating kind of hardening versus the risk. So we had probably about a 6-month process by which we looked at not only defining our goals, and our goals are really to engage our stakeholders within the Massport Authority, as well as the neighbors and those businesses that rely on us. So we put together a task force for all of our facilities. We created a group that charged them with looking at the threats, the impacted facilities, and what we're going to do about it. The Department of Homeland Security uses a process called THERA, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. When you look at it in a flow chart, it just looks like common sense, but obviously it takes a long time to both define the threats, find out where your facilities are going to be damaged and how important those facilities are to your operations, and get some kind of consensus on that, because every facility operator I spoke with thought that their facility was one of the most important. So with limited amount of money, we had to really start to narrow down on what we were going to protect and why. We looked at natural, technological, and human-caused threats. I have not dealt too much in the human cause. After 9/11, Massport really ramped up its corporate security and emergency preparedness department. They are very well equipped to deal with human-caused potential threats. Our technology department received, we gave them a $300,000 grant to look at their redundancies and discovered that they didn't have a lot, so we've given them several more $1 million to co-locate their facility away. So the thing I've been dealing with are really natural disasters. I call these our silos of excellence. We looked at utilities, fuel systems, transportation, obviously our human capital, and what we're really going to do with our buildings. The resiliency program is housed within the Department of Capital Programs, and that's where the money comes from. So obviously looking at buildings was one of my top priorities. We looked at those, those natural causes that had the highest probability of occurring and would have the largest impact, and that's how we settled on storms. We gave some consultants about $500,000 to do a disaster infrastructure resiliency program. The climate study area was Logan and Maritime. We looked back 150 years at hurricanes to see when they had occurred and what category they were. You can see in the 19th century we had a lot of category 1, in the 20th category 2, and as you know, we're increasing our storm intensity and strength, so we're expecting a lot of category 3 in the near future. We also looked at when the storms hit, which tide level. We looked at sea level rise projections, and we used something in between NOAA and the IPCC's predictions. And then we mushed this all together. That's not a technical term, but we did a slosh model and looked at overlaid it on our LiDAR models and our maps, and looked at what facilities in the port were going to be flooded in a category 2. The magenta is 4 to 6 feet. In a category 3, the blue is 6 to 8 feet. So you can see that pretty much everything's going to be flooded in a category 3 hurricane, which, as you know, because I just showed 2 slides ago, we're expecting a lot more of. We were ready to base all of our hardening engineering and architecture on those particular models. But the Department of Transportation gave the state of Massachusetts a very large grant to do a different kind of modeling, which is more probabilistic. So every dot you see here, we have data every 15 meters that talks about the probability of a storm hitting and the intensity of that storm. And so this is called an ADCIRC model and a SWAN model. And we took those and gave the modelers a little extra money to actually look at every single facility that we wanted to protect. We did the flood risk model for 2030 and then for future 2070. Came up with design flood elevations for existing construction and for future construction. We created design guidelines that all of our architects and engineers within Massport have to use, as well as all of our tenants. I told you about the 500 acres that we own. Anybody who builds on our property has to follow our guidelines. This is just an example of a new terminal that's being built at the airport. I don't have an example of one at the seaport. But the first floor is all empty. All our lifeline systems are on the second floor. This is Terminal E, which is going to be housing the large 380s that are coming in. And this is just an artist's rendering. But again, all of the lifeline systems are on the second and third floor. All of our real estate tenants in the port meet with me on a fairly regular basis at conceptual level, 30%, 60%, 90%, and then final submission to make sure they're in compliance with our design guidelines. We define critical facilities by the ability for the military to land. That was our top priority. The second was our ability to get back to business as usual. Get back to recovering. And then the third was business as usual. So for example, a terminal would be a low priority because we wouldn't be open for business unless we had recovered and the military had done their job. We did a risk-based, I know I'm zipping through these and you can answer, I'll answer questions later, but the risk-based prioritization, we looked at the probability of flooding, the consequence, and the depth. If we had a very important asset and we knew without a shadow of doubt it was going to be flooded, but it was only going to be 4 inches, well then we're going to have a very different response than if it was going to be 4 feet. We might just sandbag the area. So we came up with a set of tiers of assets that we wanted to protect based on the probabilistic modeling and its criticality score. Then we prioritize these investments by the amount that it would cost to make them hardened. And I'm just going to run through a couple examples. This is the fish pier. I actually had the consultants draw lines on where the water would come. And I found this fascinating because before these lines were actually drawn on the fish pier, our real estate and asset management folks were planning on letting all of these leases, which are fish processing plants, they were going to allow them to expire and build high-end offices there. After they saw this, they decided they'd keep them fish processing. We did this for all of the fish pier facilities, and we decided, again, we're just going to let the first floor flood. We came up with some dollar amounts, what it would cost to make it more hardened and resilient, and we're now working on that. Conley Terminal, same kind of thing. This is just an overview. We not only looked at the buildings, we looked at the cranes, which of the electrical and mechanical systems have to be, watertight on our cranes. And we came up with a series of both capital improvements and operational improvements. So where we are now is coming up with the actual improvements, the architectural engineering. The bids go out this week. But in the meantime, I decided that I really needed to have some temporary flood barriers to protect our assets until the time that the permanent hardening is in place. So we worked with the Northeastern University, and the students there researched 47 different types of barriers, and this is the one we decided on. And we just spent $1 million on several thousand linear feet of this barrier called Aquafence. I'm going to show you, I think, how it's deployed. This is just a couple minutes. Is there sound? Yes. Is that too loud? Yes? Oh. Too loud or not? not at all. What do you want to hear? Yeah, that's it. This is the police station. There's 800 linear feet around the police station. They will not be in this building during a flood. They'll be out in their cruisers. But it's very important that they be able to get back into the building and there's not any remediation problems with mold or any mildew, etc. So it was really important for us to protect this building during a flood. Okay. We're storing this in a fumigation building in South Boston. We just hired a contractor to deploy it before a storm comes. Our people are going to be too busy doing other things. So we've done this at the, I can't see what color this is. It's still green? Okay, good. I'm just going to show you a couple places in the port area. This is around the transformers. So for every place that we're deploying the aquafence, we have a set of drawings. We're also sealing electrical conduits, putting in a temporary water pump, water level sensors. We have very detailed drawings on how to connect this to the wall. And there will be flush mounts that will be on the wall, and prior to installation, they will be taken out, and then the aquafence will be put in. In places where there's going to be great wave action, like right on the pier, we're also going to be putting pavement anchors in. How this works is the water comes up, and kind of weighs down the aquafence. It's more like a suitcase that opens up. But there's, slight leakage underneath, and that's why we have the pumps. But the wave action and wind action is problematic. So we're going to have anchors where there's a possibility of a lot of wave action. So again, each of the marine operations assets has a very detailed plan. We are going out to bid, as I said, this week for the permanent improvements, but in the meantime, we have this aquafence to deploy should a storm come before we're ready. One of the things I'm most proud about in the last 6 months, we've created a flood operations plan. We can make all of our assets as watertight as possible, but if people don't know what to do, when to leave, what to do with all the stuff that's in their facility before a storm, we haven't done our job. So we created flood operations plans for both Logan and the maritime assets. And we had several guiding principles. Obviously, safety was our first concern, but we really wanted to be able to minimize the disruption and wanted to have a speedy recovery. So each of these documents is about 87 pages long, and it examines what to do pre-flood, what to do during a flood, and what to do post-flood. And it asks a lot of really important questions, or answers a lot of really important questions, like what do you do with your critical stock, and what do you do with your fleet to get it out of harm's way? Where do you park it? What do you do about debris and waste management planning? In the back of each of these documents, there's probably about 30 pages of charts that shows the facility, which department is responsible, and what it is exactly they have to do. So this is a very useful document, and it's a working document. It'll be changed every year. We ran tabletop exercises with the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, and they came and worked with each of our departments. It was a very highly participatory day-long event where we asked them what is it they would do. So they had this flood operations plan, and they were to have studied it and be ready to, answer some of these questions. And it wasn't meant to be a aha, gotcha, a pop quiz. It was really, are there any things that we're not thinking about? Have we gotten this wrong? And it was a real good way of ground truthing what would happen. We had flood forecast reports, and we basically did a simulation. They called it Hurricane Robbin, and we did this on the 29th of September, and look at this, October 1st, this is Joaquin. It was almost the exact same path. So it was really great that we had already gone through the exercises and figured out what to do. So if Joaquin had been a little more threatening, we would have known what to do. Because we always know that we can expect the unexpected is what with Hurricane Sandy. As the hurricane tracks come up before it gets to Hatteras, they're, a little more predictable, and they're moving a little more slowly than when it hits Hatteras and then starts moving a lot more quickly. So we realize we may only have 72 hours, 24 hours to get everything in order before the hurricane hits. So that's, in a quick nutshell, what we're doing at Massport. We have the really amazing good luck of, number one, having the political will to pull all of this together. Our CEO, Tom Glynn, is 100% behind this. We also have the good luck to have the resources to pull it off. I'm often asked to speak with other agencies in Massachusetts to show them what we've done, and I think they're quite envious because they have to deal with a budget process through the legislature that is competing with education and health and human resources. We don't. We have our facilities and we have our ability to do what we want in our facilities. So what we're doing now is moving out into our impacted communities in East Boston and South Boston, working with our tenants to let them know what it is that we've discovered. We have a shipyard that's on our land, and I can only imagine what kind of chemicals and hazardous materials are there, and they probably haven't thought about what to do before a storm. So for the next 6 months, I'm going to be working on doing more of those operational flood plans and tabletop exercises with our tenants. So